Great. Well, thank you very much. I can't see any of you from here, but the lights are rather bright. But I'm very happy to be here. And what I will talk about is that how, in fact, combination of education and wise government policies that are highly appreciated by the government sector, then turn out to really have a wonderfully synergetic effect, creating a new country out of what was at one time a dismal, backward former Soviet republic, and now is known as Estonia. I recently read an interview in VC, a venture capitalist magazine, interviewing a venture capitalist, fairly obviously, and in it he was asked about where he invested, and then the questions got around, do you ever invest in Europe? And he said, nah, nothing much happening in Europe, except, well, there's London, and then there's a very funny place called Estonia. And there's a reason for it. The Economist recently claimed we have more startups per capita than any other country in the world. We've been called the Silicon Valley of the North. Skype was born in Estonia by 4 kids. Well, these are young men who, after they were under indictment for inventing Kazaa, a file swapping program, then they realized that in fact the program underlying Kazaa was essentially, sort of analogous to what you needed for voice over internet protocols, and in fact then went on to invest Skype with some very good investment from some Danes and Swedes, but nonetheless it is probably the best known Estonian invention, and to this day, even though it's been bought for $8 billion by Microsoft, R&D still keeps its home there. The money, unfortunately, goes to Washington State. But anyway, and because of a number of reasons, Tallinn, the capital of Estonia today, is in addition to being the home of Skype and being one of the most, having the most startups per capita, according to at least The Economist. I don't know where they got the numbers, but it's also the home of the NATO Center for Excellence in Cybersecurity, and also the European Union Agency for IT Systems. It's all there for a reason, and that's because of the advancement of the country, or how far the country has gone. Some simple statistics, and everything is covered by Wi-Fi. The entire country, that is. 98% of bank transactions have been done online for over 20 years. 25% of the population voted online, and that really is online, not with just electronic machines in a voting booth, but really online. In our last elections, we have a vast array of services online, including, say, we have digital prescriptions where no one has paper prescriptions with a doctor's scrawl on it. The doctor writes it in his computer, and then you can go anywhere in the country and get your medicine because it's all online. Everyone owns their own data, so you have everyone can see their medical records. So that's all due to the rather sophisticated IT solutions we found. I think we have solved the traditional dilemma of security versus internet freedom. It's traditional, but anyway, the one that's all in the news today with the NSA. At least in Estonia, every citizen and resident over the age of 16 can write mails to whoever he wants and who has the same ID card without the NSA ever breaking in, because we have two-factor public key infrastructure, if that means anything to you, with 2048-bit encryption. That all sounds like mumbo jumbo, but let's put it this way: Lavabit is a was an encryption service that offered only 512K encryption, 4 times less, and they were shut down because they couldn't be broken into. So if you want secure communication, you come to my country. And on top of that, we are number 1. This way, I always do congratulate the United States for being number 2 in internet freedom. But how do we get there is the question, and here this does tie into the whole issue of youth. The problem we faced when we reestablished our independence in 1991 was that because we had been occupied by the Soviet Union, we just had been basically, development and growth had been stunted for 50 years. We were stuck with the same infrastructure we'd had before, and it became quite clear that, in fact, it would take a long time to build all the roads, bridges, overpasses, and all the other good stuff that you need for the physical infrastructure. But at the same time, it was in 91, 92, 93. Mosaic was just invented as the first web browser. People were going online. And then a bunch of people, I included, had various ideas about what we should do. And I think the main idea was that, well, at least in one area, backward as we are, we could start on a level playing field, and that was in IT. And there were a couple of other motivations that I had personally. One was that I was extremely fortunate that I was taught to program where, when I grew up here nearby in Leonia, New Jersey, which you can still tell from my accent, I was taught to program because I had a wild mathematics teacher who thought it would be very cool to teach kids how to program. And in fact, I did learn to program, and a skill which I used later when I was in college as well on my work-study job. Okay, it's not very useful for me today because I was in 1975, 76, I was programming a PDP-8, an assembler language, which is it's a language no one uses, and the PDP-8 was something about this big, and it only had 8K of memory. That's why I had to use assembler language. But I mean, what I took away from that was that, in fact, kids can learn how to use computers. Kids can learn how to program. And so one of the ideas I had was that we should start teaching kids to program at an early age and how to use computers and so forth. The other thing that really was motivational was reading a neo-Marxist Luddite book by otherwise a very smart man named Jeremy Rifkin, in which it was a Luddite book called The End of Work, arguing that computers and automatization are really terrible because people won't have any jobs anymore because machines will do it for them, which may or may not be true, but nonetheless, this was the sort of idea that he had. And I read this, and he brings an example of a steel plant in Kentucky that employed 12,000 people producing X million tons of steel, which was then bought by the Japanese, completely automatized and computerized. And then the steel plant continued to produce X million tons of steel, however much it was, but it only had 120 employees. And of course, this is all very terrible, except if you're a country the size of mine. And you recall this is the age everyone was talking about how important economies of scale are. This is in the early 90s, and we, of course, our existential angst has to do with the fact that there are so few of us, 1.3 million. What are we going to do? How are we going to compete? And so my idea was that basically, let's put everything into computers that computers can do, so we'll liberate people to do things that computers can't do. Now, how to do this? What do you do? Well, what you do, what I argued, and a couple other people fortunately supported me and found the money in the state budget for it, was to connect up all the schools, put computers in all schools, and let the kids whack away at computers and give them a little education in computers. And it was kind of a wild gamble because all educational reforms traditionally take 15 years at least to take effect. So if you do something in the early, middle 90s, then, well, you start seeing an effect around 2008, 2009, and that's really what happened. Today, I would say, beginning with Skype, which became then a model for all kinds of was a role model for all kinds of kids who saw that, well, with a little brains, a little bit of programming knowledge, and then creativity and an entrepreneurial spirit, you can, in fact, do a lot. And in fact, that's what has happened. And so today, we do have this reputation of being extremely advanced, and rightly so, because I don't think very many countries have a level of societal and governmental computerization that we have. Now, what's the lesson in this? Well, it's that basically, if you want to transform a society, and you have to start with the young people, you have to focus on the young people, and you have to give them the kind of education that allow them to handle what's happening in the future, or what you think will happen in the future. Of course, you could sort of mess up and invest in the wrong things, but we fortunately invested in the right things and have made IT and science education, put that in the core of much of our education. Today, in Estonia, we now start teaching kids in first grade how to program. Not everyone, they have the choice of doing it, they don't have to do it, but nonetheless, kids do have the choice, and the classes are overbooked. We can't keep the kids away from it. And of course, we already have a program where kids start learning foreign languages in first or second grade. Computer languages are far more logical than any human language, so they're doing rather well. So with the kids involved and with the kinds of government programs we have, and the kinds of approach to governance where we really try to offer as many secure services online as possible, more so than anyone else, I'd say, right now in the world. You have transformed a small, dingy, backward former Soviet republic into a country that is at the forefront of innovation in IT today. One very crucial innovation which you need a government for, so that the private sector can do things easily, is that we have a digital signature law, the first one actually in the world, by which you can in fact have sign legal documents online with a digital signature. That, of course, is a huge boon to business, because in fact the average time for registering a company in my country is 15 minutes. It's 15 minutes because as soon as if you do a digital signature, of which we have had already 140 million in the last 3 years, you can immediately do all the checks for a company. Has the board, does anyone on the board have a criminal record? Does anyone on the board, have all the people paid their taxes? Are there any unpaid debts or outstanding debts on the part of the board members? All of this stuff is done like that. Whereas if you do it on paper, then it takes weeks, sometimes months, several countries many months, which of course then is a huge boon to business. This is a perfect example of the kind of public-private partnership that you actually will need in the future for effective businesses, because in fact it is something that only a government can actually do, because you do have to register your company, and all the checks that have to be done are done by the government, but the idea is to make life easier and easy for the private sector. And this is where I think we have made huge advances for our business, and certainly the business community is extremely thrilled about the services that the government offers. What all of this does require is a very secure internet. I said before, we may be first in internet freedom, but on the other hand, it's also one of the most, I would argue, the most secure public service in the world. The United States, the infamous National Security Agency, in fact, 3 years ago published something called the National Strategy for Secure Identities in Cyberspace. It was the kind of 12 things, the sine qua nons of internet security. The United States has done 3 of them. When the US published it, we went through it and realized we had done all of them. And it comes down to actually simple technological architectural solutions. As I said, we have this, we have very secure communication. The other side of this is that we have a distributed system, an enterprise service bus. If there are any IT people among you, I don't know, is anyone out there an IT person? Anybody? No one? How can you do business and not be in IT? All right. Anyway, so this is something which I would say is the kind of service that government should be in, guaranteeing communications, the security and the privacy of communications. It's precisely, I mean, it does go against this kind of standard wisdom that the government is bad, whatever it does. In fact, this is a service that the government enables, and our business community is extremely happy with it. The system has recently been adopted in a government decision by our neighbor, the Finns, which is a major step forward that another country would adopt its neighboring country's computer platform. So I would predict in the future you will see more of these in the future. So, I mean, I would rank my country as one of the great success stories of the post-communist world, precisely because we have chosen this path of innovation in IT and investment in our young people, in their education, making access to various forms of internet education a priority in our country, and the effects are there. They really are there in terms of the kinds of startups that we have in our country, which are threatening all kinds of traditional business models. We have one company that in fact has an alternative model of banking, which maybe here is less important because you don't do too many financial transfers to other countries, but in fact in Europe, where you do this all the time, there are huge expenses, but with new modern IT solutions, you can in fact reduce the cost of doing business across borders tremendously. We have another bunch of very young kids invented a new service that for kind of a combination of eBay and Facebook for engineers, which has basically 10% of the world's mechanical engineers on it, offering solutions. It's called GrabCAD, CADs by which you did in fact design new things in mechanical engineers design, everything from door handles for Porsches to whatever. In any case, the point is that what has enabled all of this is having young people exposed and taught how to use computers in new ways, a willingness to actually encourage people to use IT, and the fact that the government is willing to back this up with secure services. Why doesn't the US do it? I think part of it is because any kind of secure service requires a very strong identity or authentication of identity. It is probably the key issue in computer security, which is how do you know whoever you're talking to is really that person and it's not a dog or it's not a bad person or whatever. Sort of think of it this way: you live in a bad neighborhood and the doorbell rings and then you press the intercom and it says and your girlfriend says, "It's me, honey," and you let the person in the door, but it turns out it's someone who's recorded your girlfriend saying, "It's me, honey," and then all of a sudden you're in trouble. Well, that's the problem with most of the problems that we have on the internet, at least on a day-to-day basis, and the problems that companies face, that individuals face, is that you trust someone for being who they are when in fact they're someone else. And that is the issue of identity. And the fundamental issue that needs to be addressed by countries is the authentication of identity. And I would argue you cannot do that unless you actually have a more sophisticated system where everyone has a SIM card, either in a card form or in their phone. And for some reason, the Anglo-Saxon countries of UK, Ireland, United States, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia all find this the idea of a ID card in one form or another anathema. Yet at the same time, if you want to have a secure identity, you're going to have to go this way. The idea which you have here in the United States of buying something by putting your credit card number into on the web, and then you put in this thing called a CVC, security code of 3 digits. I mean, that is not a secure identity. I can't believe you guys do this, but in any case, you do. The point is that if you want to move on, you're going to have to find a much better way to secure identity, because that is the rate-limiting step right now. If you cannot trust identities, you cannot develop a fully engaged e-economy, and that will become more and more of a problem in the future. Already, daily we read about identity theft. Daily, we know. Right, yesterday, it turns out that Mrs. Obama's data have been stolen. I mean, you have to move on to something more secure, and that will enable, if you do that, it will enable greater progress. So having a country that is as E-based as we are has multiple side effects. The first one, of course, is transparency and low corruption. Because basically what it comes down to is you can't bribe a computer. I mean, it just doesn't take the envelope. And so if you put as many functions, especially those where there are non-discretionary decisions, where you just have to check the boxes. If you fulfill it, you get what you're supposed to get, whatever. That takes up much of what you do as a citizen or a business dealing with government, and which in corrupt countries, there's always someone you have to hand the envelope to in order to get this thing you should be getting anyway. When you computerize society, you can no longer do that, or it doesn't work because the computer makes the decision, the person doesn't make the decision. So transparency and low corruption is one of the first side effects of going in this direction. We found it enables all kinds of new solutions when you have trusted identities in a computerized society. We've come up with some pretty wild ones. For example, civil society has become far more engaged in my country. When I was growing up in New Jersey, we had Earth Day. In 1970, I think, was the first Earth Day, and people go and collect garbage. Well, in my country, we also have piles of garbage that are left everywhere. And, there have been cleanups for all these years, which never really amount to much. So finally, two of the founders of Skype invented a program for free. They just thought they'd be nice guys for mobile apps in which you can go around and take pictures of garbage. It sends the GPS coordinates to a central computer. People then can sign up for places nearby to go clean up on a Saturday. A logistics company created IT logistics company developed a program to organize when the garbage trucks go to the right place. And so we had this cleanup, and we basically cleaned up millions of tons of garbage. And that was in Estonia 6 years ago. Today, this thing which you can look up on the web, which is called Let's Do It World, one word, .org, it has been in 96 countries. 7 to 8 million people last year engaged in cleanups all over the world. It would not have been possible without the IT solution that was really just volunteered by two Skype geniuses and then a logistics IT genius. And they just said, well, this is a good idea, let's do it, let's do this program that you can download onto your iPhone. So the power of technology to actually transform societies is not simply something that works in a formerly backward, dingy, former Soviet country that pulls us up by its bootstraps, but in fact has become popular in the United States, Germany, Brazil, they're all doing it too. So what I would say in closing is that if you want to see genuine progress in the future, where more and more of our solutions will be IT-based, invest in young people, and their IT education as much as possible. Start early, to start teaching kids to program at an early age. I don't know why in the United States, back when I was young here, you start learning foreign languages in 3rd grade. Now I see that there are no language requirements, and maybe some people start learning foreign languages at age 10. Of course, I realize English is now the worldwide language, but nonetheless, the later you start, the harder it is. Start teaching kids how to program. When they're in 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade, it will have a huge effect in 15 years, which will come sooner than you think, I can say, as a near 60-year-old. And the other thing is invest in modern technology. Get over the hang-ups of, okay, we don't want an ID card, because in this modern world, unless you have a real identity, you will be stalled. You will not be able to progress with all of these various IT solutions, because ultimately what it comes down to with all the stuff that we are facing today, including the NSA, is that if you don't have a secure identity, someone's going to get into your stuff and steal it or look at it or snoop around, and you really want to feel secure in cyberspace. With that, I think I'll just end. I think that's enough on my part, but it was great to come here. And if there's any message I would say is invest in young people, teach them IT. Thank you.